This is part 2 of the UI Sampler lab doing the scripting. If you are accidentally watching this one, go back and look at part 1 where we set up the buttons. I also talk about getting the script created and hooked up to this assignment. So if you missed that one, I suggest going back and looking at it. This one we're going to focus on the slider right here. What's going to happen is when this is set up, it's going to work where if we slide the slider, the text is going to get bigger and smaller based on where the slider is. It'll be fun. So the first thing, let's set up the slider a little bit better. There's a couple of things that we want to set this up for over here. So I have it selected. I'm going to go over here to the inspector, and what I want to set up is the min value and max value. And we're going to use this to set up the font size of this. So we probably don't want a min value of 0. So I'm probably going to make the min value maybe like a 12. And the max value like a 96. And we want to make sure that our whole numbers is turned on. And I'm also going to set like the initial value. If we go back to the text over here, our initial value is a 48. So we might as well keep it nice and have our initial value as 48. And we can check this if we hit play. And we can watch in the inspector as we slide this, we can see that the value is also sliding. So it's all the way down to 12, all the way up to 96. It's not hooked up to the test text yet, but we can at least see that we have this thing hooked up correctly. So next thing, we're going to go back to Visual Studio, and at the top we have to add a new public variable. We're going to need a public variable for that slider because we're going to need to be able to access it so we can see what the value is when it changes. So up here we're going to say public, and it has to be public. If we don't, we won't be able to tell it what slider we're working with. Public slider. And we're just going to call this slider because that's what it's called in Unity. So we're going to save this, and we're going to go pop back up to Unity for a second just to make sure that in our UI controller we do see it. It's right there, and we might as well hook this up. Same thing, same way as the text. Click and drag that slider over and drop it in, or we could click the little circle to add it. Okay, so all we have to do now is we have to code that. So we're going to scroll down. I'm going to add a new little section here and call it slider events. This is just so that it's a little bit easier to tell where things are at. And we need to make a new event. And again, we're coming up with the name ourselves. These aren't names that we Google search for to get information about because we are inventing these names. So like the other ones, it has to be public because we're going to have to hook this up to that slider out there. So public void on slider change, because we are going to look for anytime someone drags the slider, it's going to call this event. So we're actually going to see the font changing sizes as the slider is moving. So it's going to get bigger and smaller as the slider is changed. It'll look really nice. So what we need to do is we need to declare an integer. I'm going to call new font size. And this is going to hold, if we pop back to Unity for a second, it's going to hold this value. We're going to send this value to it so that we can change our font to that number. So again, I said this in the last video, if you want to compress these lines into less, that's fine, but I kind of go over it nice and gentle. So if you want to do it in multiple lines, that's okay too. It's up to you. So we got our variable declared, and then we're going to set that equal to that value. And we do that by saying new font size is equal to slider.value. And we are going to get an error. And if we hover over it, we can tell what it says. Cannot implicitly convert type float to int. This is kind of similar to, if you remember from that random click when we had to put that integer into the test text and it said we can't convert an int to a string. Same kind of issue. That slider value, even though we told it to be a whole number, it still comes in as a float value. So we need to convert this float value to an integer so we can go into this variable. And the way that we do that is in front of it, we just, in parentheses, just type int, and this will convert it to an integer so that it can then be stored in here. This is just how it's done in C#. I would make a little note to yourself that this is, how to convert a float to an int. This is how you do it. Again, if you forget this, you could always Google it. It's pretty basic knowledge. It's really easy to find if you don't remember. Okay, so we have our new font size. So next, all we have to do is take that test text again, dot font size is equal to new font size. And that's it. I'll show you, when we pop back over to Unity, I'll show you where I got this name from. And I will save this, and I will go back over to Unity, and let's take a look. So where did I get that from? I got that from over here. If we go to the test text, and font size. So test text dot font size right here. And let me test this out. Oh wait, sorry, one more thing. We have to tell the slider to change. So we have to hook up an event. See how the slider, rather than an on button click, it says on value changed. We have to hit plus and add that UI controller, and then underneath no function, go to our lab 2 on slider change, that one that we wrote. And it's now hooked up, and if we hit play, we should be able to see it get bigger or smaller. The reason it disappears is I need to make that box a little bit bigger. Slide it over. And bigger, smaller, bigger, small. So it works out. If this is not changing, one thing you might have done when you set this up, on your test text, if you accidentally clicked best fit, it's not going to work. So make sure this is not clicked. And that's it. That's all you have to do with the slider. And I will, in the next video, show you how to do the inputs. And then last, we'll do the drop down. So I'll see you in the next video.